Center is to provide workforce training to the early childhood community, the child care centers, and the family child care homes in Miami-Dade County. We serve over 20,000 educators that are working with children 0 to 4, and we have established a wonderful partnership with our local Children's Trust in Miami. We have worked great together, and also the system partners. We have collaborated very well with them throughout the years. Thank you for your time and listening to me today. So my vision for Escambia Children's Trust is really a holistic approach. And before any planning takes place, there are some really important questions that we need to ask. First, we need to ask who we are serving. What are their specific needs? We know that not everyone in the community has the same needs. What supports are currently existing? And how can these entities collaborate? Are these supports equitable and accessible to all? What are the structural and institutional barriers that are present today for these populations? How can beneficiary voices be heard? And are the supports aligned with the guiding principles and what it would cost the community if children and families are not supported? We talk a lot about return on investment, and the research does show that investing in children early, providing families with support early, and providing early intervention really provides a great way for children and families to be productive citizens, to incorporate themselves into communities, to reduce crime rates, and we know what the research states on that. And so these are very important guiding questions that would need to be addressed, not only with the board, but also with partners within the community, because this will take a village, literally, to provide supports for the community. The strategic plan for the Escambia Children's Trust will be supported by a vision and mission and guiding principles through goal setting and targeted objectives, and obviously looking with an equity lens. It is informed by research and use of best practice, consistent with community involvement and coordination of efforts, and also to tap into the local nonprofits that have high potential for positive impacts and are currently serving the community right now. Realistic benchmarks need to be established that are attainable, equitable, and based on communities' needs. And the strategic plan will be reviewed on a yearly basis to ensure that it aligns with the vision and mission and guiding principles of Escambia's Children's Trust. It is important to look and focus on grassroots efforts to penetrate the community with already existing nonprofits and organizations serving children and families. The Escambia Children's Trust guiding principles are based on the Florida statute and the Escambia County Ordinance, which provides and maintains preventative, developmental, and other services for the welfare of the county's children, to focus on social determinants of health and well-being, consult and collaborate with other agencies dedicated to serving children, and reduce the duplication of services. I'm sure that it is a concern and something that needs to be considered to see what organizations within the community are already providing services and ensure that the Escambia Children's Trust leverages those services and reduces duplication. To collect, analyze data, and conduct community research projects that will benefit children of the county. And this is very important. Data utilization is very important. And community research projects will allow Escambia Children's Trust to address issues and really conduct a needs assessment of what is needed within the community to serve children and families. Ensuring that health and safety are top priority while being culturally sensitive and responsive are also very important aspects of the guiding principles. I cannot continue this presentation with presenting already existing data that will be useful for Escambia Children's Trust to utilize. The first one is Achieve Escambia. Achieve Escambia, I had the pleasure of reading their progress report on equity, and they highlighted some really important issues that the Escambia Children's Trust should really consider when developing a strategic plan to serve the community. The other is Achieve Dashboard. I was recently invited to participate in this launch for the Achieve Dashboard, and it has some really valuable data on health and social well-being, education, quality of place, economic vitality, and workforce and demographics. The other is the Sunshine State Portal, which is Florida's early childhood integrated data system. Now, this data system you can do a search by county to see the child care center status, the school readiness status for each county. And this is just a snapshot of what Escambia County's data shows right now. And I think that it will be very useful to collaborate with the Early Learning Coalition as well. Will be a very strong partner with the trust in achieving school readiness and reducing the readiness gap. So I have 3 strategic investments that I wanted to talk to you about this morning. The first one is the early childhood investments for children 0 to 4. These are just some of the examples that I would like to focus on with the strategic investment of the trust. We have families that are facing hardships and children as well. I was a young mom at 20 years old, and I had to apply for public assistance and prenatal care. And my experience was that it was very difficult, and it was very, I was very anxious sitting in those clinics, waiting for my name to be called and not being certain of what I needed to do. And so I think for children 0 to 4 to really be healthy, we need to take care of their moms and make sure that the moms are receiving the care that they need, both prenatally and postnatal care. The infant mortality rate is really high in Escambia County, as far as the data says, and so addressing those needs is very important. And early intervention, as I mentioned before, and investing in infant mental health supports. We know that early intervention is very useful and it's very beneficial. And the early years, we know that brain development happens. 80% of the brain is developed by age 3. And so we need to make sure that the caregivers and the care that the children are receiving in Escambia is done by qualified staff and people who really know what they're doing. The 45-hour training is not enough. We need qualified educators and a workforce that really understands brain development and child development. And so I also want to focus on children with disabilities and make sure that their needs are met. We know that families and parents that have children with disabilities face a lot of hardships, and their mental health is also important. Targeting children most at risk. And also partnering with the community action Head Start partnerships. Right now, Miami-Dade County's Children's Trust has a match grant where they provide funding for extra slots for children in Miami-Dade County, and I think that it will be a great opportunity for us to also partner with the community action Head Start here in Escambia. The other strategic investment would be the youth development for K through 5 and also 6 through 12 for summer and after school programs. In Miami-Dade County, we have had, with the Children's Trust has had a lot of success with youth development and providing supports for the youth to promote academic success, skill building, to reduce the dropout rate, increase attendance, academic progress, and reduce risky behaviors. Also focusing on the juvenile justice system is something that is also very important to target that population. And also thinking about how to develop civic engagement within the youth, right? And to develop a youth committee for the youth to be an active role, have an active role in presenting their ideas, right? And encouraging them to be involved with the trust. The other strategic investments is for families. I know that this is a long list, but families also need a lot of support. Families are facing hardships right now, especially after COVID. the COVID pandemic, such as there's a lot of food insecurity, there's a lot of unemployment and displacement from homes, and high crime rates. All of these issues affect children. We know, I've been reading in the Pensacola News Journal about the homelessness situation in Escambia County, particularly with the tent cities that are affecting the county along the I-110. And I know that, I think about, are there children living there? What are the situations that families are facing that are causing them to be homeless? And so I think homelessness is an issue that needs to be thought about and talked about. Improving high quality access to high quality and affordable childcare for families. We know that some families are spending up to 50% of their salaries in childcare, and it's just not affordable for them. And so finding ways that the Children's Trust in Escambia can leverage those supports so that families can actually afford quality childcare for their children. Addressing the neighborhood and family structures like welfare and disabilities, incarceration, LGBTQ populations, domestic violence, those are all the things that are affecting families. Health screenings are also something that families would need as well, including dental checkups. So mobile units will be something that would be useful and are useful in other communities. In Miami, we have those mobile units that provide screenings for children and checkups and dental screenings and oral care as well. In terms of fiscal management, the annual budget obviously needs to be aligned with Escambia's Children's Trust strategic plan, the board priorities and community needs, set by goals and strategies and projected outcomes that can be detailed in a budget briefing. The ad valorem tax revenue does have a possibility to change if tax and property values go up, so that's something also to consider. The funding availability will determine funding recommendations, and adjustments will be made annually. It is my vision to have a CFO for the fiscal department in the Escambia Children's Trust that will be responsible for preparing management and oversight of the annual budget. The budget forecasting will focus on priorities and transparency to taxpayers and interested parties. And obviously the first year will include just general line items for targeted groups, because as the Escambia Children's Trust starts off, there's not going to be such a direct focus on supports. It'll be general. But as the years go by and as conversations take place with partners and other community agencies, that budget will be more defined. It is also important to have emergency funding. We saw with COVID in Miami-Dade counties, the Children's Trust down there was able to make quick shifts and provide PPEs to the community and to their funded providers during COVID. So it is very important to have an emergency fund. And also to review the budget on an annual basis. Obviously that will take place as well. The funding request will follow a procurement policy that is very detailed for the purchase of goods, services, and grants. That will include a code of silence, conflict of interest, code of ethics, and list of requirements for each funding opportunity that is presented. It will follow a multi-step process that is open and fair. And one of the things that we can also do when RFPs or funding opportunities become available is to invite the community to be reviewers. Right now, the Children's Trust Miami, whenever there's a funding opportunity, they send out a newsletter which has a lot of information, a weekly newsletter. And in that newsletter, they ask the community to be reviewers. Now, the review process is very extensive, but it allows the community to be part of this process. And maybe someone wants to apply for a grant at the trust. And being a reviewer will allow them to see the process and experience that. I know that currently the Escambia Children's Trust has an RFP out for organizational leadership, development and assessment and training. And I think that will be a great opportunity to build leadership within the organization. The funding oversight will be aligned with Escambia Children's Trust mission and values, will be based on a metric system. Right now, our organization is measured, our success and our progress is measured on a metric system. The monitoring includes, safety, administrative, fiscal competencies, compliance, health and liability, staffing, data quality, and service delivery. The evaluation and oversight, my vision is to have that done on a quarterly basis by contract managers who will be assigned to oversee specific contracts. And in this evaluation and oversight, there will be a report that will identify the progress for each of the metrics to see if the organizations that are being funded are meeting those metrics, if they need improvement, if they're advancing, if they have mastered. And so those are the metrics with regard to funding oversight. The operations management obviously will be determined by hiring qualified, diverse staff. Also, capacity building for promotions and retention of staff and to maintain high morale will be something that I will focus on. Creating a chain of command within the organization or within departments. Create policies, handbooks, standard operating procedures that staff can follow. Have consistent and regular staff meetings with department heads and create opportunities for innovation and shared goals. I also want to focus on adaptive leadership. So we have seen through COVID how adaptations have been made throughout these almost 2 years that we've been in this pandemic. And so adaptive leadership development is something that allows the leadership within the trust to adapt to changes, to adapt to needs. And so this adaptive leadership strategy will be something that I will focus on. The HR department will obviously hold all record keeping, make sure that policies are adhered to, and all things related to employee relations. I also want to have an IT department where someone will be in charge of enhancing the web and all social media presence and outreach for the trust, and ensure that the executive director works closely with the board. That is very important. In terms of community engagement, well, community engagement means just that, to engage with the community. I am not one to sit behind a desk. I want to talk to people. I want to engage with people. I want to hear their stories. I want to see what they need. And so being part of the community is very important in this role and will be very important in this role. It is through ongoing engagement with community leaders and organizations that will determine the success of the trust, utilizing resources, allow communities to be the leaders of change, allow communities to voice what their concerns are. Through the Equity Leaders Action Network, I am a fellow with the Build Initiative in Miami-Dade. And one of the things that I learned through this fellowship is about, just an example, an organization that's called COFI. It's Community Organization and Family Issues. And what they do is that they train parents in the communities to be leaders in the advancement of issues affecting their local communities. And so this is just one example of how we can utilize already existing efforts to engage the communities and ensure that they have a seat at the table, that we're listening to what their needs are and what their concerns are. The other thing that I learned is that in Pensacola, there's a gentleman called Quint Struder. And he's a resident of Pensacola. He's a leader, he's an entrepreneur, he's a businessman who supports Pensacola communities. And along with the Struder Community Institute, he's dedicated to making Escambia County the first American early learning community. And I think this is a great opportunity to call him up and say, hey, you know, we want to invite you in. We want to have a conversation. This is our mission. This is what we want to accomplish. How can we collaborate and support each other? Sorry, this is acting up here. The other existing resource that exists in Pensacola is Parent University. Now, this program began in Savannah, Georgia, and is now being offered in Pensacola. And it provides parents with resources and training based on their needs, and they can have these resources and meaningful trainings on parenting their children. And I think that we can also tap into this and partner with Parent University to ensure that parents' needs are being met. In terms of advocacy, basically advocacy will need to be focused on addressing the needs of children and families through strong partnerships with stakeholders at the state and local level. We also need to encourage civic engagement. It is my hope that within the trust, there is a position for community engagement, and within this position will allow for the community to be engaged, the community to be heard, and also for advocacy opportunities to present themselves. I think it's also important to speak to and make sure that elected officials in Escambia are included in this process, because obviously we're gonna need their support to advance issues around children and families. In terms of board relations, it is my hope to be transparent, to have an open lines of communication, to be available is very important, to assist with any and all matters, to really work in partnership with the board together, attend all board meetings, provide a quarterly report of progress across funded providers, and be open and mindful at all times. So I also have projections for the future, 2 to 5 years out. And that is to think about having an integrated data system. So an integrated data system is useful because it will provide a lot of useful information. Right now, there are different data systems that currently exist, but in the future, it would be amazing to have an integrated data system where important information about children, their academic success, where they're at, and what their needs are would be accessible. I also think that once the Escambia Children's Trust gets underway, maybe in 2 years, maybe in 3 years, we can start thinking about creating a system partner collaboration and bring those system partners together in a meeting to discuss the things that they're doing, to collaborate, to talk about successes and challenges and things that went right, maybe things that didn't work so well. To have a provider and parent advisory committee is also very important. Right now in Miami-Dade, there is a provider advisory committee, which is selected through an application process. And I think the provider advisory committee also provides a lot of information, useful information about what their needs are and their perspectives as well. To have ad hoc committees as well for needs that may present themselves in the future or things that we would need to focus on. In Miami-Dade County, there is a professional development system right now. And right now we have the Children's Forum manages the registry, which is a professional development system. It has a lot of workforce data, 13 years of workforce data. And I think creating a professional development system for the workforce that are caring for our children is very important, as well as a training registry where educators and the workforce can go to and tap into quality training opportunities. So what will determine success? Well, what determines success for me is not be afraid to make mistakes. You know, we're not perfect. We might try some things that might not work out, and it's okay. And so making mistakes is not really a bad thing. I think it provides opportunities for growth and for innovation. To have an equity lens and be equity focused and driven. We know that there are equity issues within our entire country. And I think it's important to really have those conversations and address those issues to ensure that families are not continuing to be challenged and receive the supports that they needed. We also need to include childcare programs and the workforce, as I've mentioned them before, take risks, have strong partnerships, mobilize and maximize existing solutions. Be disruptive innovators, and I don't mean that in a bad way. I mean that in a good way. You know, sometimes we need to just sit down and think about what is already happening. How can these things be done in a new way so that we can advance the issues of children and families, and we can ensure that they're being served properly. Always take time to understand. Everyone has a story, and it's important to listen to those stories. Work with hope and optimism. Always assume goodwill. That's what I do. I always assume goodwill. Lead with love. We are all here because we all want to make sure that children are receiving the support and they grow up to be healthy and happy. I have children. I'm sure that some of you here also have children and wanted the same things for your children. And so, you know, it's important to make sure and keep that focus that Escambia's Children's Trust is here for the children and for the parents and for the community. Value inclusion over hierarchy and lead others to achieve beneficial outcomes for children and families. And it really does take a village. We can't do this by ourselves. We need to collaborate and form strong allies and partnerships within the community. And I'm sure as long as we do that, the Escambia Children's Trust will be successful. I always like to leave my presentations with a quote. I won't read them all, but I will read one. It says, "Learn from the people, plan with the people, begin with what they have, build on what they know. Of the best leaders, when the task is accomplished, the people all remark, 'We have done it ourselves.'" And this is by Lao Tzu. And you know, the Children's Trust is really here for the people. So it's important to keep the people in perspective when thinking about how to do our work. And who guides this work? Well, the children guide our work. Happy children, happy families guide our work. In my ELAM fellowship, one of my ELAM fellows made a comment. And her husband said, "My biography is the curriculum of my work or my calling." And that's what I want my biography to be, the work and the calling that I have to work for children and make sure that children are receiving the best quality care they can. So thank you so much for your time.
Thank you so much, Ms. Cruz. The first question that we have will deal with strategic planning. What experience do you have developing an organization or a program from scratch? And can you describe a success as well as a failure and what impact each had on you as well as the organization?
So part of my current work right now is to make sure that the professional development system in Miami-Dade County caters to our very diverse population. So 7 years ago, when I took on the role of director, I had to think about how am I going to serve the needs of each individual child care center and family child care home who are serving children. And so I really had to think about those questions and really tap into those child care centers and those family child care homes and talk to them and have conversations and allow them to express what their specific needs are. I had to work with my funder to make sure that the plans that we had were aligned with the scope of work and our deliverables. I had to work with our VP of research to ensure that we were utilizing data properly to address the needs of our workforce and meet the demands of our diverse population. And so we were able to successfully provide trainings and professional development to thousands of educators, but we're still not where we need to be in terms of providing equitable opportunities to everyone. Our scholarship application process has some challenges and barriers to access for our workforce, and so we have to rethink that through. Also, we have to think about what are the communities that we're not hearing from, that we're not collecting data from, and what are we gonna do about that? And so part of the equity work that I'm doing right now is to collaborate with institutions of higher ed, with community organizations, to have focus groups and invite the childcare programs to come and have conversations with us about their specific needs. So the success is that we've been able to meet the professional development needs of a lot of the educators and the directors and owners, but the process to apply for the scholarships is challenging, and it continues to have barriers for equal access to everyone. And so we need to address that challenge, and also the challenge of equity and making sure that everyone is able to access these supports and resources.
Thank you. Next, we're going to turn to the area of financial management. The trust will be awarding funding to organizations to improve the lives of children from birth to 18. What experience do you have, and what processes have you used to monitor outcomes, return of investment, and evaluate the progress?
So currently, we have, again, data that we utilize to address the school readiness rates of children that are in VPK programs and enter the public school system. We have partnerships with the public school system to track children, to see how they're doing in third grade, right, when they take those standardized tests. And so we want to make sure that we're doing everything we can to tap into that data, to tap into those resources so that we can build those partnerships and that collaboration with those that we're serving, and also how are we going to track the success of the children's, the outcomes of the children and the services that they have been receiving.
Concerning operations management, what experience do you have, and what process do you follow for attracting, hiring, coaching, and terminating employees?
So right now we have HR policies, we have onboarding procedures, we have application processes that we follow for any candidates that are interested in positions within the organization. And so part of the hiring process would be to make sure that positions are posted, make sure that ample time is given for applicants to apply, preferably through an online process instead of a paper process, making sure that when that window of time for application is done, that an interview is conducted immediately, utilizing a certain criteria and questions to make sure that the job description is being filled, and then using a fair process to evaluate and determine the best candidate for the position. When policies are not adhered to, or when there is a performance issue, then that employee will be placed on a corrective action if needed. And if the situation or the problem continues to exist, then reach out to HR to make sure that proper documentation is made for justifying the termination of employment.
Thank you. As we look to community relations and advocacy, from your understanding, who is the customer of Escambia Children's Trust?
The customer of Escambia Children's Trust are the children and the families that we're trying to support. And so making sure that a holistic approach to serving children and families is taken, but ultimately we are here for the children and for the families and for the community.
excuse me, as a key member of the trust team, your community relations activities will be critical to our success. Please describe what types of community outreach and community participation you feel will be necessary to ensure the success of the trust.
I feel that to start off, what I would want to do is to organize focus groups with the community in different areas, possibly. And invite the community, invite parents to have conversations, to identify what their needs are, what challenges they're facing. I think it's very important not to have a cookie cutter, idea of what the community needs. Data is important, but we also need to hear from the beneficiary voices of the people we're trying to serve. And so I think holding focus groups will be my priority, to listen to the community's needs. And the other thing that I would want to do is to have a meeting with system partners and organizations that are providing services to children and better understand what they're doing, what their scope of work is. And having that knowledge will allow the board, to make decisions about where funding opportunities need to be concentrated in.
Thank you. In looking at our diverse community, give examples of your previous efforts and involvement when working with communities of color around evaluating and determining the community needs, especially as it pertains to improving the lives and well-being of children.
So in Miami-Dade County, we have a very diverse population. And particularly with communities of color is the focus of my ELAN work, to make sure that the workforce in Miami-Dade and the families' voices are being heard. And so when I think about working with diverse populations, I have had experience working with diverse populations. I was a career advisor and went into the neighborhoods in Miami-Dade with communities of color. I worked with the childcare workers very well. And so, I really love people. I love to work with people. I like to listen to what their needs are and what their stories are. And so I think that it's very important to keep that mindset and make sure that we are prioritizing those most at need and making sure that the diverse population that exists in Escambia is heard.
And is there any additional information the board should know about you to aid in their selection for the executive director role?
Well, all I can say is that I am very passionate about this work. This is the work that I want to do, for the rest of my life or for as long as I can. And I think, Escambia County is such a beautiful county with so much potential for growth. And I think being in this role will allow me to expand my reach, will allow me to serve more children and families. And with the knowledge that I have gained through the 10 years that I have been in the quality improvement system in Miami, I think it gives me great knowledge to be more compassionate and be more understanding with the issues that face families. And with that understanding, with that love and passion and commitment, and professionalism at all times, it will allow for a successful Children's Trust.
Thank you so much. And do you have any questions for us?
No, I just want to thank you all for your attention and your time. Thank you for the invitation. It was really an honor to be here, and I'm really looking forward to this opportunity.
Thank you so much for your interest in participating today. We have a meeting tomorrow night to discuss the interviews, and we will be in touch. Thank you again.
Thank you so much.
Safe travels.
Thank you.
Should we adjourn? Patty? Just so you know. We're going to take a 10-minute break. That's okay for everybody.
We have until 11, correct?
11:15.
Yeah, right here, right here.
Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
Get out my
Is the
notes.
microphone working for you? Will you test it out real quick?
Test, test.
It sounds like it's working.
Okay,
All right.
grab my notes.
Okay. Welcome, Mr. Fritz. We are so glad you're here. Thank you for applying to be the Executive Director of the Trust. My name is Stephanie White, and I'm Chair of the Trust. I would like each board member to introduce themselves real quick for
Okay.
you. We'll start with the Commissioner at the end.
Thank you, Madam Chair. My name is Lumen May, County Commissioner for District 3. Welcome to Pensacola.
Thank you, nice to meet you.
Hi there, I'm Judge J.J. Fedorowicz.
Thank you for pronouncing that.
Hello, I'm David Peden. Welcome.
Thank you.
My name is Lonnie Wesley. I pastor a local church here in the city.
Nice to meet you.
I'm Patty Hightower, I serve on the school board. Welcome.
Thank you.
Good morning, Tim Smith, Superintendent of the School District.
Nice to meet you.
Rex Northup, a retired pediatrician from the community, and
Dr. Northup, nice to meet you.
lifelong resident.
Morning, Mr. Fritz. Walter Sox. I'm the Regional Director for DCF, located in Tallahassee, but cover the whole Panhandle.
Nice to meet you.
Good morning, Tori Woods. Thank you for being here.
Thank you, nice to meet you all.
We also have Carolyn Appleyard, who is our interim administrator, Mandy Esmondo, who you met with Landrum, and Meredith Bush, our attorney, here with us today. And additionally, the public was all invited, and they're probably watching online right now. So just a reminder, we have 60 minutes for your board interview. You will have 10 minutes to tell us your vision of the trust, and then I will ask you a series of questions. At the end, you will have time for final thoughts and any questions for us. Before we begin this interview, I want to confirm that you have not listened to the prior presentation.
That's correct.
Thank you. All right, you may go ahead.
All right. Thank you again for having me here. I have a lot of thoughts for the vision and goals that I wanted to talk about today. So I'm going to move kind of quickly, and I apologize if I don't get a chance to cover everything that's on my slides or in my presentation. I couldn't keep it below 10 minutes when I practiced. So you'll see a lot, you'll hear me talking a lot about vision, fidelity, traction. I arrived at a system that I propose for the trust, based on experience working with program startup, working with different providers across the agency that I work in, different types of programs, as well as with stakeholders in the regions that I serve. So what I always noticed was that you had a lot of good people doing their own thing, but they were swimming different directions. So there wasn't a whole lot of alignment, there wasn't a whole lot of overhead vision. They'd be operating in silos, and they wouldn't really understand what another person was doing. So I've seen that as a barrier. I've seen that as a barrier externally, but also internally, especially with folks that don't understand what accounting needs to know, and timing the paperwork, and what income statement means, as well as what the accounting folks needed to understand operations folks. So I spent a lot of my time in my career balancing those needs, helping to translate the needs of one to the other. So that's where my whole presentation has come from. So the vision, fidelity, and traction draft that you'll see, it's on page 5 of the PowerPoint. It's a draft. I put a lot of ideas in it, and just so I state that once, that anything is in here, I would be open to feedback and discussion. So why am I thinking about this? When you look at basically how we achieve goals, there are 3 kind of basic ways that we get things done. There's a decisive vote. You guys pick an auditor, select an executive director, for example. There are breakthrough results, the things that you in the trust would like to achieve, those things that differentiate you from another county, differentiate one entity from another. And then there's the whirlwind. The whirlwind is that everything that is urgent, that requires energy and focus, we all have one. It consumes a lot of our time and energy. But I want to focus on the middle, that breakthrough results. Those things require change in behavior. So as we get through, as I talk through the form, I want to connect the high-level vision, develop a line of sight with a high-level vision of the trust with the front-level actions of the providers. And this form in particular, the bottom section talks about what I would do as an executive director. So there's a line of sight for my role, what I would see as executive director, but also what I would do with providers. So that line of sight between connecting the vision that's important for the trust with the operating system is where my thoughts were. A lot of details on this. There's the form. So it starts with the core ideology. I believe in your planning sessions. I heard that purpose statement, which I really like. I added some thoughts to it. And to me, it is crucial. I proposed a draft mission statement. And I don't know if you have a draft vision or mission, but I proposed a draft vision and mission statement. I proposed a 4-word mission statement because I really believe in the power of simplicity, power of words that are very meaningful that people can buy in, because those things are words that you easily remember, and then though if you remember them, that can inform your behavior. And I see that come through in language of the company that I work with now. We have a 4-word mission statement, and the customers actually are talking about, the mission statement. It's different than that, but there are 4 words that influence language. So those things are important. Now, as we move through the VFT, we first start with the vision, and then we get to fidelity. And that's where I would spend time teaching desired behaviors and practices. So the values are in there, what we would support as far as evidence-based practices. But to me, I would just want to put out to just imagine the possibilities when all of the energy that's here in the county, all the energy to support this trust is aligned around the same common vision and moving in the same direction. So with that shared approach, there are some beliefs, being intentionally exclusive, intentionally inclusive, intentionally open so that we're collaborative, and we are mindful of trauma-informed care. Being mindful of trauma-informed care means that you're aware of what has happened to somebody else, and that has influenced their behavior. So part of the process here is establishing a focus on lead measures. And part of my experience working in human services, I've noticed that a lot of folks are focused on target measures, the improvement in functioning, income statements, those things, all very good measures. But what you can influence is not necessarily influence the income statement. What you can influence is your actions today, how much billable time you've done, your attendance rate, things like that. Those are the things, maybe getting what you're doing to get kids to school. I mean, those are the things that you can do today to influence a lag measure. So the part of the process that I would propose is spending time focused on what the providers can do, as well as what I would do as to influence and predict success on lag measures. Other part of the fidelity is teaching leadership principles. I believe it's very important to keep things simple. Engage, resolve, deliver are 3 principles that cover a lot of desired practices from leadership perspective, and those are the things that I would, exhibit myself, but also then work with providers to teach. I have a larger leadership model. Leadership, it's based on the idea of leadership and management equals accountability, and there's 30 some desired behaviors in that model that I would teach to others, and that would help folks focus on the priorities. So you get to the final section of my vision and goals. What you see in the document, the VFT document at the bottom, as I said, is the information that would really apply to the executive director role. So the purpose of that is taking the alignment, the big vision and goals, and starting to move that into increasingly near-term objectives. So with the 10-year vision, having trust established so that voters renew it, I think is a very clear 10-year vision. 3-year would be to have an adaptable system in place that's functioning. And then, of course, with 1-year targets in that the form itself, I've listed, a number of systems that are up and running, the right people in the right place, that things are off, in like good to great processes are started, but not delayed because of, pursuit of perfection. And then as far as with providers, it'd be establishing breakthrough targets. And then the final part of traction would be the short-term priorities. These are 90 days type priorities where my focus would be connecting with the community, understanding needs, developing plans, and then activating those plans. A lot of engagement in connecting to the community would be my vision, at least in the beginning, to understand, in their words, the needs, and then developing solutions. So I'm not sure how much time I took, but I went through a lot of details there as quickly as I could.
Thank you so much. So for our first question is going to deal with strategic planning. What experience do you have developing an organization or program from scratch? And can you describe a success as well as a failure, and what impact each had on you as well as on the organization?
A lot of experience. I started 19 programs. One of those programs didn't go so well. It was a program that worked with the Children and Youth Agency to provide some trauma-informed supports in the process of a child being removed. Because you have these little ones who are in the middle of a traumatic situation, and they need help. It didn't work out so well. Great ideas and so forth, but it was one of those cross-systems collaboration that was, I think, adversely influenced by the constant changeover in staff, and that was something that I learned from that to plan for. I think that sort of interagency cooperation needs regular training, regular interactions. On the positive side, organizationally, the company that I work for has a brand new name, mission, vision, values. Those are all things that in my time I advocated for to address some challenges that were there and improve the engagement of staff. The mission that they have has been one that I mentioned really does pull people together. One of the first programs I started is still in business, and it's a regular $2.5 million a year income for a $20 million company.
Awesome, thank you. Next, we will turn to financial management. The trust will be awarding funding to organizations to improve the lives of children from birth to age 18. What experiences do you have, and what processes have you used to monitor outcomes, return of investment, and evaluate progress?
Balanced scorecard is the framework that I use. So, and typically in a for-profit business, the balanced scorecard starts with looking at the internal business processes, looks at learning and growth, and goes to customer, and then with the final outcome being financial. But I re-envisioned it to revolve around like a flywheel around the mission in the middle. And so then the experience that I have is then taking whatever program it is, whatever agency is looking at the key indicators that are going to help keep that flywheel moving around the mission. So from creating and adapting a balanced scorecard to a nonprofit, to setting up systems in SharePoint to collect data, been involved in managing our strategic information system.
Concerning operations management, what experience do you have, and what process do you follow for attracting, hiring, coaching, and terminating employees?
Total of 22 years of operations leadership, starting a team leader role and going through currently nearly 9 years now as COO. The this human services are all about the people. So it's all about how you develop and support the individuals that are out doing the hard work. So recruiting and retaining is, how can you, pay the best, but how can you also develop supports? One of the things that I created was an enhanced employee assistance program that did more to unite the staff than just a typical employee assistance program would do. Again, it's all about how can you develop and support the staff.
As we look to the community relations and advocacy part, from your understanding, who is the customer of the Escambia County Children's Trust?
I think the primary customer is going to be that little child, a child and family that is going to make progress. That's the end customer. Of course, you have some important customers with the taxpayers, with the providers, anybody. There's a lot of stakeholders. In my mind, the primary one, though, is that child whose life you're trying to impact.
As a key member of the trust team, your community relations activities will be critical to our success. Please describe what types of community outreach and community participation you feel will be necessary to ensure the success of the trust.
I think a wide range of media outreach will be necessary, as well as meeting with groups of folks. I'd like to form advisory committees of just individuals from local communities who have certain needs, because I want to be able to hear what they need in their own words. I think an app would be great to develop, to just have something where somebody could provide immediate feedback or observations, as well as any other outreach, social media that if there's talking in public with events or radio or anything like that, that would be desired.
In looking at our diverse community, give examples of your previous efforts and involvement when working with communities of color around evaluating and determining community needs, especially as it pertains to improving the lives and the well-being of children.
So in one of the programs that I oversee is a school-based therapeutic and education classroom. One of the things that the agency did, that led the agency to do to help deliver that program, with good outcomes, was bring in a lot of supports for understanding trauma-informed care and how we would build brain-based resiliency in the young folks. Most of the young folks that we served in those programs were folks of color, and it would really, what the company designed to teach, how to be a student, to teach just how to deal with just different situations, was something that made a lot of progress for those kids.
And is there any additional information the board should know about you to aid in their selection for the executive directive role?
Well, this is not very eloquent, but when I read the job description, I said, this is a job that I would love. Starting programs and working to bridge silos is something that I feel like is important in this position, and I've done that for the last 2 decades. I just enjoy that.
Do you have any questions for us?
What's the board's vision on how you would work with the executive director in terms of decisions? Like, what decisions are the executive directors? What decisions are the board's? Is there a process of handover?
Anyone is welcome to answer these questions.
I liked your earlier comments about collaboration, communication, some of those types of things, and I think that is what I would envision the board working collaboratively with the executive director. Certainly, I think the way we envision this, everyone up here other than myself in retirement now have full-time jobs. and that although this has become a large part of our lives over the last 8 or 10 months or whatever, we would envision the executive director being very much the boots on the ground, day-to-day operations, really that individual overseeing, and hence the questions about community interaction, those types of things, that that executive director would be the recognized face of the Children's Trust, and the board would be more aligned with working with the executive director, developing policies, procedures, hitting on big kind of tip of the iceberg issues and opportunities, with a lot of feedback, again, coming from that executive director of where the focus needs to be, where we would get optimal. I think, and previously you'd mentioned low-hanging fruit, early wins, those types of things for the near term, while simultaneously working collaboratively among ourselves, stakeholders in the communities and others, to look more at those 3-year goals, 5-year goals, and those types of timeframes. But that very much the executive director would be the one doing this as the full-time job, overseeing it and really looking at the nuts and bolts of it. At least that would be my take on it. Open to.
Okay. I mean, that makes sense. You guys are volunteers and doing a lot of good work when you're in time. So this is, I just figured that there would be a process of handing over. The timeline for other positions, what are you thinking in terms of additional positions? Would you want those folks hired within a month, 3 months, 6 months?
That would be up to you as the executive director.
All right, because I think that my vision would be able to go in and really start getting my hands into things to be able to understand exactly the needs. And so that would give me time. I appreciate that. I didn't catch, but has anything been funded yet?
No, not yet.
Okay. So you guys are probably ready to write a check and get something funded?
That's our goal, to do that in this spring, early summer, by spring, summer time frame. But we're waiting on the executive director to help us with the process of applications and requests for proposals. And
Okay, that was my next question. Do you have a process?
And just to be clear, the funding doesn't get lost. It rolls forward. So while summer programming is something that we would be real excited about doing, post-procurement and all that, we're not going to lose money if we don't fund something.
Okay.
So we want to be careful and consistent with our decision-making.
Understood. So one of the things that I've seen is that sometimes in the desire to get something funded, a provider will say, hey, I'll do this. And so they'll end up with more providers doing the same thing. And then there's more competition for less resources, like specifically staff. So I think competition, among providers in terms of quality is good. Competition among providers for the same limited resources is bad. So I just wonder if you, as a board, have thought about that perspective. Would you, in certain situations, look to promote an existing provider to fill a gap and learn something new, versus having somebody else launch something completely different?
I think this is what we continue to struggle with.
Okay.
I mean, we don't know.
Okay.
Well, and if I can add, I think one of the essential aspects of this position is trailblazing, because we are new. I think we started meeting in March, was it? So we haven't even been a full year yet. So we are looking for that leader to make that pathway and help build this to be as robust as it can be to impact as many children.
Well, those breakthrough targets come from a change in behavior, doing something we haven't done before. For me, speaking in public like this is not something I typically do, so to be honest, I'm a little embarrassed when I stumbled over the word inclusive earlier. That was totally stupid, but
We all make mistakes.
Anyway, it never happened at any times I practiced it.
Yeah.
But really one of the things from a provider perspective, having lived startup of new programs, that whirlwind is something that people don't understand and that consumes all of their time and energy that, and they don't devote enough to start up. So all of the ideas that I put into that vision, fidelity, and traction form are really kind of a combination of research and what I've seen from the trailblazing. Questions? I have. So as far as the competition for limited resources, I mentioned that earlier. I think one of the big things across the nation right now in human services is finding staff. So in addition to funding programs, are you also willing to fund any sort of initiative that just targets building the staff pool?
Yes, definitely.
Okay, excellent. What about, I think, like a conference, just professional development for the human services providers. One of the most powerful training sessions I ever went to is a guy by the name of Horacio Sanchez, ResiliencyInc.com. Wonderful, has a book on closing the learning gap, achievement gap, I'm sorry. That bringing in a speaker like that would be something I think would be tremendously powerful for the entire network of human service providers. And anybody would be interested, really. So is that?
Definitely, yes.
Okay.
Yes, capacity building is something that a lot of the children's trusts around the state work with and they fund, and so is teaching, professional development, having speakers come in.
Excellent.
Our broad swipe of looking at things again on your timeline part of things would be somewhere doing our interviews now, which we started with our first phase, now having people in live. We will be meeting tomorrow night as a board for further discussions regarding the interviews today, that type of thing. We're kind of ballparking getting someone as far as an executive director hired and on board in the late February, March kind of time frame. Is that correct? If I'm out of line here anyway, or someone, please speak up. But then have talked about working with said executive director, doing a lot of these foundational types of steps that you've talked about, from needs assessments, looking at the community, determining what resources are currently here, how we can interface and collaborate with them, those types of things. Having the executive director begin determining staffing needs, those types of things. And have all that taking place through the spring and potentially into the summer, and with ballparking things of doing evaluations for funding requests, sending those out, getting them returned, evaluating them with the board, that type of thing, and beginning the initial funding of actual programs and all, starting probably with the new school year, academic year coming up. So it would be the fall of 2022 that we hope to actually begin dispersing some of these funds.
Okay, that makes sense. That would give me some.
Dave, you've got a look like I'm misspeaking or something here.
The only thing I was confused about, you said something about March, or we want the executive director to hit the ground running as soon as possible. We make the decision whenever their time frame is to pack up their things and move, or whatever they got to do. We want them to get going. So I think the timeline's a little quicker than that. That's the only aspect.
My timeline would be something in March. So would I be able to join meetings virtually before then? I mean, that would be part of what I would envision, getting up to speed before I actually arrived here. All right. Again, I thank you for your time today. The form that I proposed, I just want to emphasize that I put a lot of ideas on there, and I'm open to discussion with anything that's on there. I don't mean to have it proposed as this is the mission statement, for example, or these are the values. I think a lot of good information can be brought to the table, and I just wanted to bring
Thank
my
you.
ideas.
Yes, thank you so much, and we will look through this, and we have a meeting tomorrow night. Oh, yes, ma'am.
I was just wondering, because we do have some extra time, were there some things that you want to hit that you did not hit in your presentation?
Oh, there's a lot, I'm sure.
I just thought if there was something that you specifically would like to give us a little more information on.
So, one word, metacognition. Metacognition, so that's thinking about what you're doing, thinking about everything. That is something I think is absent from providers when they're working. They're not necessarily thinking about why we're doing something. They're thinking about the job at hand. So the line of sight, the metacognition, the traction, those are the things that, in my experience, and has led me to this sort of spot. That the individuals that I worked with, as supervising or stakeholders in other communities and in other programs, that just weren't really necessarily thinking those big picture things, and as well as thinking about, in terms of execution, thinking about measuring lead measures. These are all just things that my head's been swimming in those things for a while now, but what I acknowledge is that the folks that I would work with aren't necessarily there in that spot. So my approach would be to talk about those ideas in small chunks and start to move the individuals toward the place where they're focused on, what is it that we do today? What is it we do this week to impact early infant health, early childhood development, for example. Any other? At the moment, I'm not thinking of it. I'll walk away and think of other things I wish I had said, Patty, but I thank you for that opportunity, though. Do you guys have any other questions about me or anything that maybe I could explain further to help with evaluating me as a candidate?
So we have the set questions for everybody, and so for fairness, I'm looking at our attorney right now to see, well, because we do have 20, 30 more minutes, so we do have more time. I know that we all have questions, additional questions we could ask you, but I don't know, Meredith, where do we go with that?
I think if there are specific questions related to something that he presented, that would be perhaps appropriate, but not starting a new line of other unrelated questions.
All right, so does anyone have any questions along those lines? Go, Judge.
We can't branch out into new discussion, is that what I heard?
Right.
One of the things that I'll mention that's on my presentation is positive youth development, Judge. And that's something that's probably relevant, probably on your mind. I wanted to find a positive way to talk about reducing juvenile incarceration, delinquency, those types of things. But positive youth development is a particular model that's out there. So I did mention that in there. That would be something I think to look toward with juveniles.
Madam Chair, can you expand on, I won't ask a question, but when you talk about reducing juvenile incarceration with this positive youth development, can you expand on that just a little bit?
Sure. So I mentioned Horacio Sanchez. The research that he did and talks about is developing the universal protective factor. That's having the presence of an adult mentor in somebody's life for at least 2 years. That would be part of it. So developing protective factors around our youth to offset risks. And that's what resiliency is really about, developing protective factors with risks versus protective. It's really, the child in front of you, the youth in front of you has a backpack full of risks, different things that have happened to them. So then I view the system's jobs and our jobs as adults around them to develop protectives that can offset those risks. And that's more about that.
No, thank you. That's pretty interesting. Thank you.
Thank you.
Tell us more about your one-year target on the traction. You have the one-year targets.
Okay.
Can you talk a little bit more about that?
Sure.
And also your short-term priorities and how you would accomplish those.
All right. So in the traction part, this is something that was part of the presentation that I mentioned. This would be, what's in here is for my role as the executive director. What this bottom part I would adapt for providers to focus on short-term priorities and 90-day priorities and breakthrough targets for them. But what I have on here for the one-year targets is to have the systems and the processes operating. So, I mean, there's a lot, developing policies, getting things working. In my experience, there's more to it than you can summarize in one statement. So I would be working on that. The data collection, I would use that approach that I talked earlier with the balanced scorecard approach, focusing around the mission and identify some key performance indicators in each of the areas, like in financial and learning and growth and internal business processes and customer, that would be lead measures to start building then a compelling scorecard for the trust. The right people in the right seats, that's such a fundamental, simple truth. You have to have the right people in the bus in the right seats. So hiring would be crucial. So to me, asking the question about, have you issued a check yet? And Dr. Northrop remembered the part about, some quick wins. I think getting some checks written, some summer programs funded, or anything else that is an immediate need that we can fund quickly without a whole lot of infrastructure building, that would be part of it. But then, as I mentioned, they're establishing the breakthrough targets with programs. In terms of the short-term priorities, the connecting, the understanding, the planning, and the activating, those are the just keywords that would guide everything that I would do. Connecting with all the stakeholders, connecting with you as a board. I would have to understand the sunshine law, so that I obviously stayed in compliance with that, and understand then how to interact with you. That would be new for me, but I'm sure that that's fine. I think my perspective as somebody new to the area, I would spend a lot of time just getting to know folks, and I think that would be helpful from my end. Is I don't really have any preconceived notions of what's been done, what happened with an agency years ago, or anything like that, because I know those things happen. I would be more concerned about in the moment and moving forward. Just understanding the needs. I think it's crucial to meet with folks and hear from them what their needs are in their own words. So that would be just important. I mean, we can look at data, but that only tells part of the story. And then under planning, there's, I think it's crucial to make sure that we're spending enough time, considering options, looking at potential outcomes, those things. And then connecting with the public and activating connections like that, I think, are crucial. If I think a taxpayer here is just would want to know what's being done, and they're going to want to know the simple steps, simple outcomes. Just here is the from the outputs of the number of kids that we worked with to some life-changing improvements. So beginning to work on identifying those and get them out there. I think that's activating those connections with the public would be important. I mentioned the app, and I would see that being part of it, just updates on outcomes.
Thank you so much. If there's no further questions, we really appreciate you coming and preparing this for us, and we look forward to talking to you in the future.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Have a good day.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So at this time, we can take a motion, we can adjourn till 1 o'clock, or do we recess? Sorry, not adjourn, sorry, recess.
Do you think Mandy can call this afternoon people and tell them that we're just running ahead and to be here earlier? I mean, 1 o'clock is fine for a long, I mean, and again, it takes a while to eat lunch anywhere downtown. But as far as the afternoon people go, I mean, we're clearly not really taking an hour and 15 minutes to
Sure, I mean, yeah, we can definitely call her. She
Well,
told the people.
A cautionary note, our first presenter took 28 minutes in her presentation, and even though the questions were rapid, another one could take 45 minutes. So
And
I wouldn't assume that anything is going to, we didn't stop them at 10.
I noticed that.
And because we didn't stop them, we have to let them all go.
Well, I didn't, I
So,
figured
I
that
think-
was, she knew her time limit, and I
I
just.
know, but
See how
I
she-
don't think you could predict that the other ones wouldn't go long, so I would be careful not to tell people that we're going fast.
Also, Mandy did tell everyone to come 30 minutes early. So that's how, Mr. Frisch was already here because she told him to come 30 minutes early. So if we
Okay, well,
run.
then that works.
Yeah, it works.
Yeah, no, I would agree that there could be some people that take much longer, but even taking much longer.
On the questions, yeah. All right. Well, thank you all, and we will see you at 1 o'clock. Carolyn, if we leave anything here, will it be safe? Yeah. Okay.
they make and how they are so important to have in your homes. This is a standard smoke alarm that you see in most homes today, and we're going to demonstrate the sound that it makes when it's activated.